All right, let's dive right into today's explainer. We're unraveling a terrifying medical mystery that recently grabbed global headlines. Honestly, it's a story that sounds exactly like the plot of a Hollywood thriller, but it is chillingly real. We're looking at a silent killer that boarded a luxury cruise ship and sparked absolute international panic. Picture this. It's April 2026. 150 passengers and crew members representing 23 different countries set sail from Ushuaia, Argentina. They're heading for the remote, icy waters of Antarctica. It's a dream vacation, right? Everyone is socializing, partying, completely unaware that a deadly, invisible threat has literally boarded the ship with them. For the first few days, everything is absolutely perfect. But then, the nightmare really begins. Just days into the trip, a rapid, totally unexplained sequence of deaths starts to unfold. First, a 70-year-old Dutch passenger comes down with a fever and mild diarrhea. It seems harmless enough at first, but by April 11th, his breathing fails and he passes away. Then, on April 24th, his grieving wife leaves the ship, flies to South Africa, and tragically collapses and dies right there in the airport on April 26th. Shortly after that, a German woman on the ship falls ill and dies by May 2nd. The passengers are dropping one by one, and nobody has a clue why. This triggers a massive World Health Organization investigation. Tests are finally conducted, and the diagnosis comes back. The culprit? The Hantavirus. Now, this isn't just your run-of-the-mill pathogen. It's a ruthless killer. There is no FDA or WHO-approved vaccine. There is absolutely zero proven antiviral cure. Suddenly, this luxury vessel is a literal ghost ship, stranded at sea with no country willing to let it dock. Section Unmasking the Hantavirus. HFRS versus HPS. You see, this isn't just one isolated virus. It's an entire family of viruses, primarily carried and transmitted by rodents. Different types of rats and mice carry different strains, and they attack the human body in two totally different ways depending on where you are on the map. Over in Asia and Europe, it primarily causes hemorrhagic fever with renal syndrome, or HFRS for short, which leads to internal bleeding and complete kidney failure. But over in the Americas, it triggers hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, or HPS. And this variant aggressively attacks the lungs, filling them with fluid until the victim tragically suffocates. But here is the most terrifying part. This virus can kill up to half of the people it infects. That's right, a 50% mortality rate. And because there's no medical cure, doctors can literally only offer supportive care. That essentially means they just try to keep your body functioning while your own immune system fights a desperate, exhausting battle to survive. A history of outbreaks. To really grasp the sheer terror of what happened on that 2026 cruise ship, we have to rewind and trace the historical footprints of this virus. We're talking over 70 years ago. This is not a new enemy. Let's jump back to the 1950 Korean War. Over 3,000 American soldiers stationed in South Korea were suddenly struck down by a mysterious, horrifying illness. We're talking intense fever, vomiting, and kidney failure, with a 15% mortality rate. Doctors called it Korean hemorrhagic fever, but honestly, they were completely baffled. Was it a natural disease, some sort of chemical weapon? It actually took 30 long years to solve that wartime mystery and prove that this lethal agent was being carried by rodents. In 1980, a brilliant South Korean virologist named Dr. Ho-Wong Lee finally isolated the virus, tracing it straight back to local field mice. He named it the Hantavirus, after the Hantan River that flows right through that region. So the culprit was unmasked at last, but it definitely still had some deadly surprises waiting for us. The El Niño connection. So how do these outbreaks just suddenly explode seemingly out of nowhere? Well, the answer lies in the environment. Think back to a tragic 1993 outbreak among the Navajo tribe in the American Southwest. Perfectly young, healthy people were suddenly dying, but Navajo tribal elders actually recognized a deadly ecological domino effect happening. A massive 1991 El Niño weather event brought unusually heavy rain. That rain grew a massive bumper crop of pinyon pine nuts, which in turn fed a whole lot more mice. And that exploding rodent population ultimately led to a sudden human outbreak in 1993, carrying a staggering 75% initial mortality rate. And hey, the virus isn't just confined to the Americas or Korea either. A multi-institutional study conducted over in Vellore proved it has been silently infecting populations in India for years.
Researchers found 28 confirmed cases, specifically among high-risk groups working closely with rodents, like warehouse workers, local rat catchers, and chronic kidney patients. But here's the wild part. 4% of the general population already had hantavirus antibodies. It was flying completely under the radar.
Now, for decades, scientists believed you could only catch this from direct contact with a rodent. The science was pretty much settled. But a horrifying discovery was about to flip that core assumption entirely on its head.
The Andes strain and the next global pandemic?
Enter the Andes virus. This is a specific strain that caused a massive 1996 outbreak in southern Argentina. And honestly, it broke all the known rules of the hantavirus family. It can spread directly between people. That is literally a virologist's worst nightmare. It is the only strain with confirmed human-to-human transmission, complete with documented superspreader events where just one person infects many others. And this brings us right back to our doomed 2026 ghost ship, because this exact Andes strain was what was silently multiplying on board.
We now know that patient 0 contracted the virus on a simple bird-watching tour at a rat-infested landfill right before boarding in Ushuaia. If they had boarded just a few days later, the whole tragedy might have been avoided. But they boarded immediately, sparking a deadly chain reaction that resulted in 10 cases, 3 deaths, and a ship that was finally forced to dock in Tenerife, Spain, for a massive medical evacuation.
So you're probably wondering, is this our next COVID-19? Thankfully, no. The hantavirus requires extreme, prolonged close contact. We're talking sharing a bed or bodily fluids, and it only spreads during a tiny one-day window right at the onset of symptoms. It is not airborne like the flu. Because of these incredibly narrow factors, the WHO actually considers the global pandemic risk to be very low.
How to stay safe? But even so, we absolutely cannot just ignore it. With new El Niño weather patterns constantly approaching, which we know explodes the rodent population, and that terrifying 50% mortality rate lingering, this is a major wake-up call for localized outbreaks. Personal prevention is absolutely crucial. Your best defense strategy is actually pretty straightforward. Seal up your home so mice can't get inside, maintain really strict food hygiene, and for sure wear an N95 mask and gloves if you ever have to go into a dusty, closed-off storage area. Doing that effectively eliminates the threat.
I want to leave you with this final thought to wrap up our explainer today. The hantavirus has been silently living alongside us for decades. It thrives right in the shadows, just waiting for the perfect environmental conditions to strike. But now that you know its secrets, how will you protect yourself?